Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is Stump #1 Remastered by Nathan Rosario. And some history on this comic book. First off, this was originally an Indiegogo campaign that believe came out in the 2018-2019 timeline. It's one of the earlier sort of works that came out. I kind of missed the first campaign that this came out, and I think this is like the first one was just Stump #1, not necessarily remastered. And this was actually procured in a 2-in-1 pack with Stump #2 that I got. So some story on this comic and how I kind of discovered it. Those of you guys who kind of remember a while back, there was a YouTube channel, Inch High Comic Guy, and besides making some rather critical videos on Comicsgate, which kind of feels a bit vindicated at this point, he kind of mentioned this book as one of the underrated books out there in crowdfunding that nobody really noticed, and really most underrated books in Comicsgate, right? There's actually a big thank you to Ethan Van Sciver at Comicsgate in this book. Now, I'm not going to talk about Comicsgate in this video, but what I will talk about is this particular book. Inch High's video actually got me to back this 2-in-1 package just because I was curious how good this book was. And having read it right now, the short, review is it's good, it's decent. Great or amazing, I don't know if I would necessarily agree with Inch High's opinion on it. I think it's pretty solid. I think there are some better books in CG than Stump. What I will say is, for the work of one person, this is really impressive, and also for the amount of value delivered by the campaign. I thought it was very, very good. Now, let's kind of just jump into it right here. There's a lot of thank yous and a dedicated to a lot of sort of personal items to this book. One thing I really like about Stump #1 is it's, the saddle stitched. Unlike Stump #2, which is perfect bound. Again, I also understand why it went to perfect binding, which Nathan Rosario made very clear during the campaign. And I totally get it. It's just, it does kind of annoy me that now we have two different formats for the #1 and #2. What I also like is there's no extra fluff in this book. It's very efficient. The inside cover right here, you got a thank you and a bunch of, dedications and whatnot. And then on the back side, you have some fan art, some more commentary, and hey, send your, all your letters to your emails to my email address, blah 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 blah, etc. Right? Very, very clean cut, very efficient. The rest of it on the interior is all the 48 pages of content. One thing I'm kind of a little bit, 50-50 on is the page weight. I think he goes off with a pretty thick paper, and it's got a bit of a gloss finish to it, which, again, I'm more of a fan of matte finishes than gloss, just because gloss really sucks in the light. But overall, can't complain, pretty good. Feels fairly sizable. This is excellent quality, right? Now, on to the story itself. We'll just jump in here. There's a big, opening splash page right here of the main character kind of floating in space, buck naked, basically burning up into the atmosphere right here, about ready to have his Terminator 1 entry. And what's really cool is the thought balloons. And here we go. We have a Comicsgate comic that uses thought balloons. Now, admittedly, Nathan Rosario uses thought balloons very sparingly. But when he does do it, it is really nice. You get sort of some insight into Stump, which makes him, I wouldn't say a well-developed character. I think there's still a lot more that Nathan Rosario could do to make you kind of understand and get into this character. That being said, these early books are more plot-driven, at least attempted to be plot-driven, than character-driven. And I think with the name of the book being Stump and the character as what they are, my early recommendation to Nathan Rosario is the same thing with, it's the same issue with Stump #2, is he should consider, especially now that he's made enough content, to focus on the books being more character driven than plot driven. Just because I think especially since he doesn't have an editor and other stuff. His plots are, they're a little bit all over the place, where I think his character design and the voice of his character is so well done in these books that I think you're better off approaching the storytelling in that way than you are doing it in the more classic plot-driven way. Not that you have to abandon plot-driven stories. It's just this character, you could literally make a slice of life book out of Stump. He's actually a pretty, decent character in that regard. Not that I'm saying he should do that, but just consider driving the storytelling more in that direction. So he's entering the atmosphere, and you get sort of an early look that Stump is not from this world. He's clearly of alien origin, even though he looks very human. There's kind of a Superman type of feel to this character, right? He kind of re-enters the atmosphere and lands right in the middle of the Midwest, and basically takes out an abandoned building. And a lot of Nathan Rosario draws a lot of like the human male muscular figure. So I wonder sometimes if he shouldn't advertise this book to women because he might get a lot of backers that way. Anyway, so he ends up helping out this old lady and this cop fighting off this alien, which is kind of my one big bugaboo about Stump number 1 is this alien comes out of nowhere in the first 5 pages, and then there's like this little addendum at the end where sort of the dude who was kind of looking and watching him through these lenses kind of comments about some sort of alien organization or experiment that they're doing on Earth or something. And it's really I wasn't a big fan of this. Like I felt it was just left out there as a loose plot thread. And since it's the first thing we're introduced to, I found that really weak and kind of lame, honestly. And this is why I think Nathan should, either consider getting an editor to kind of punch holes through his plots and basically tidy it up and clean it up a little bit more for him, or consider going to more of a character-driven storytelling scheme. Because I think in terms of character-driven storytelling, Nathan's pretty solid as a writer. I just find the plots are a little bit like, oh, okay, he lands on Earth and the first thing he does is some heroic thing against a random alien that just shows up. And these guys aren't even seemingly freaked out about the entire incidents, right? So kind of like, in a way, this is kind of like a writer forcing a plot to be rather than it naturally occurring, right? But anyway, we get some flashbacks of him being basically space super soldier and fighting all these animals and stuff and discovering this alien race. And then here's another criticism I have. He uses this scheme right here, which is kind of like a combination of like modern vlogging and a little bit of the Dark Knight Returns TV a little TV news reporter bullshit thing going on here. And the problem with it is that I immediately, like, Stump number 1 was actually harder to get through than Stump number 2. And I think the big reason is there's just a sort of inconsistency. A lot of stuff that I think he just wanted to add in because he wanted it. And I think an editor would have helped him kind of clean it up, be like, does it really need to be in here? Does it really help this? Like in this instance, this entire page here could have literally been deleted and Stump number 1 would have actually been better for it. Sometimes less is more. And in this instance, this wall of text of this random dude that I don't know, that I don't care for, doing a dated concept of vlogging like this doesn't work for the story. And in this instance, I would have just gotten rid of this thing. Now, what does work is this scene right here. This scene's actually kind of freaking funny. So he's getting like an appointment from this lady, and this lady's kind of like into him and whatnot. So you get a little bit of comedy right here. And even though Nathan's art, you could tell he's kind of like getting better and better. There's some good, decent backgrounds right here. It's a more charming scene that kind of builds on his character. In addition to giving him his main name right here, Stump, right? Which is not just a description of what he looks like, but also has an origin in this cop's old wrestling buddy from way back in the days. So you also get an origin right here of why he looks like a human, but he's from outer space. again, I kind of find like there's a weird thing I have to suspend as far as like nobody here seems weirded out by any of this. And there isn't like this cop's not like calling like the Pentagon or freaking, I don't know, the Area 51 with this dude coming from space, right? Or maybe he just thinks Stump is just a crazy dude, right? Well, in which case, if he's a crazy dude, why is he bringing him over to help him with this, right? So Stump gets kind of pulled over to, I guess, deal with this giant, Titan robot right here. And again, this robot right here, which eventually they come to name him Blinker, right? And has like a pretty cool story. It's a good character, but the plot that delivers the character is not very good. And that's kind of my problem with this book, is that a lot of great characters, just the plot, like, I think like Nathan would have just kind of written out how this plot kind of flows. I think he would have probably realized like, yeah, wait a minute. And that's kind of the problem with Stump number 1. There's a lot of great characters in here. It really doesn't, like, the plot really is kind of all over the place and really needs some more background and building up to. And unfortunately, Nathan kind of wants to do what he wants to do, and I get it, but a lot of things you have to build up. Luckily for him, he got his characters right. And sometimes that's kind of all you need, is if you can get your characters right, a lot of stuff can be forgiven. It also helps that his art's pretty solid too. So we go into this. He ends up breaking into this laboratory for Blinker because they end up making friends with each other. And he runs into this Dr. Goodman. One thing I will say about this book is it is definitely not slow or decompressed. A lot of stuff happens in this book. So it's definitely a great value. I just think there just needs to be some more polish done by like an editor or by Nathan, considering the structure of the story. Again, it is what it is. It's already happened. The book is there. It's not going to change anyway, but considerations for the next couple stories, which you should consider taking a look at, because the characters are good enough that I think Nathan can continue to write stories about this despite the flaws of this book. Don't get me wrong, I'm being critical of the book, but it's still a great buy, especially if you can get it for kind of the original pricing that it came out, or less, considering it's done and he's probably going to go into reprints, right? But anyway, he runs into this crazy Dr. Cornelius Goodman, who basically was the one who kind of rescued the alien that lives inside Blinker, this giant robot. And he ends up going crazy when he, discovers the existence of aliens and all this other stuff, and becomes paranoid, thinking all these aliens are going to conquer Earth, right? So he ends up making a giant robot army that tries to take out both Stump and the alien threat. And then Stump proceeds to open up a can of whoop ass on everybody and blow the place up. Yeah. There's a lot of these panels which, like, I'm okay with. Like, this is technically a little lazy because it's kind of like he's repeating the same art over and over again. But in this case, it kind of works in terms of creating some humor right here, so I don't mind it so much. Compared to some other comics that just sort of take advantage of this stuff to fluff up the page count. I will say here as a commentary, the panel count in Stump number 1, I think I like a lot more. Like, I like how as he gets further in the book, the panel count starts to increase. And I think that is good. I think he's kind of getting into a groove right here. Whereas like in the early pages, the panel count's a little low. There's a lot of like 1-2 page panels. One thing I also like about Nathan Rosario is he doesn't go overboard on double page spreads. There are a lot of 2 panel pages and maybe even one big splash page type of designs, but there's also a lot of high panel count right here. So you end up getting a ton of story in Stump number 1 compared to other equivalent crowdfunded comic books. So anyway, turns out, this guy Blinker, he's trying to find his wife who he thinks is lost on Earth. So Stump, basically resolves to go help him out. And then we get one last flashback of his time in whatever super soldier program he has. And some kind of enemy in space. Again, the origin story right here, I think, is probably the weakest part about Stump. I think the character alone, without an origin story, just his personality and his reactions to things on Earth works better than me knowing about this kind of stuff. Like, I get it, you do want a good origin story, but in this case, all of these pages should have occurred in the beginning rather than cut apart through the middle right here, because there's too much information. And a lot of times when I'm reading through it, I'm kind of like trying to remember, like, wait, what was he? I have to go back to the end. That's never a good thing when you're reading a story and you feel like you're doing homework and research rather than enjoying the story, right? Anyhow, yeah, they end up going to sleep, and it's kind of the end of the issue right here. Some art right there. I'll go over issue number 2 later, but I did want to go and review Stump number 1. So overall, kind of agree with some other people that this is definitely underrated in among the indie comics from Indiegogo and among the CG comics. Is it great? It definitely is excellent value. Art's solid. Like the characters. I think the plot and the plotting needs some work, and definitely the pacing, it doesn't need to be slowed down, but there needs to be some sort of better connection and flow, I think. This is yet another book that could have been really, really good with an editor, but obviously it's low cost. He's just making it by himself with whatever money he could fund. So, it's very difficult to get an editor in those instances. In that case, just looking at it as it is, as an unedited passion project, Stump number 1 is excellent. The greatest, but what is really greatest, right? If you consider where it's coming from, I still think this is a very impressive book. Anyway, that's the video. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got any comments on Stump number 1 by Nathan Rosario, leave it down below. I will see you next time.